How dare you touch my son? Alexandra's voice cut through the air, sharp with rage as she clutched her boy. Theresa Loren sat by the pool, drenched and shivering, her clothes soaked from diving in to save him. The crowd's stares bore into her, yet her dignity held firm. Where are you watching from today, Miami, Tokyo, or Cape Town? Drop your city in the comments. This isn't just a story of a black scholar's bravery. It's a tale of resilience and shocking truths. How will Theresa face this injustice? Can her quiet strength overcome prejudice? Stick with us. The twist will leave you speechless. Subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories like this. And share this journey with someone who needs to hear it. Trust us. You'll want to stay until the end to see how this unfolds. The neon lights of the Sunset Haven Resort's bar flickered like stars trapped in glass, casting a kaleidoscope of blues and purples across the polished mahogany counter. The air hummed with the soft pulse of jazz, a saxophone weaving through the clink of ice in highball glasses and the murmur of well-dressed guests. Miami's skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a constellation of ambition and wealth. But inside this opulent bubble, time seemed to slow, each moment dripping with the weight of luxury. At the heart of it all stood Theresa Loren, a 25-year-old black woman whose presence was both invisible and undeniable. Her deep brown eyes sparkled with a quiet fire, and her smile, warm yet guarded, seemed to hold secrets the room wasn't ready to hear. She moved with the grace of someone who'd learned to navigate the world's sharp edges, her hands deftly shaking a cocktail shaker, the ice inside rattling like a storm about to break. Theresa wasn't just a bartender at this five-star resort. She was a paradox, a scholar among socialites, a dreamer dressed in a black apron. By day, she was a graduate student at one of America's top universities, her mind sharp as the pen she wielded in lecture halls, dissecting theories of educational equity with a passion that left professors nodding in quiet awe. Her research wasn't just academic, it was personal, rooted in the stories her father used to tell her about growing up in a forgotten corner of Miami, where dreams were often buried under the weight of poverty. When he passed away 2 years ago, his death left a void in Theresa's heart, but also a legacy she refused to let fade. The inheritance he'd left her, modest by the standards of the guests she served, wasn't spent on designer bags or a new car. Instead, she poured every dollar into charities that built schools and funded scholarships for black children in the very neighborhood where her father once played barefoot in the streets. It was her way of keeping him alive, of turning grief into hope. But tonight, behind the bar, Theresa was no heiress, no scholar, no philanthropist. To the guests sipping their $30 martinis, she was just the bartender, a shadow in a uniform, expected to smile and serve without being seen. Her black curls were pulled back tightly, framing a face that carried the weight of a double life. Her skin, a rich mahogany, caught the neon glow like a canvas painted with light, but the ache in her shoulders told a different story. The long hours, the endless demands, the way her manager's eyes lingered too long when assigning her extra tasks, they all pressed against her, testing the resilience she'd built over the years. Yet, she never faltered. Each cocktail she poured was a small act of defiance, a reminder that she was here by choice, not necessity. Theresa had taken this job not for the paycheck, but for the truth it revealed. She wanted to feel the world unfiltered, to understand how people treated those they thought didn't matter. Growing up, she'd heard her father's stories of being dismissed, overlooked, and judged for his skin before his character. Those stories had shaped her, but they weren't enough. She needed to know for herself what it meant to stand on the other side of privilege, to wear a name tag instead of a title, to smile through slights and still hold her head high. So she'd begged her godfather, James Carter, a man who'd been her father's closest friend, and now the university's esteemed president, not to pull strings or shield her from this life. He'd agreed reluctantly, his eyes heavy with worry, but he trusted her strength. He always had. The bar was a stage, and Theresa played her role with precision, She memorized orders without a notepad, her hands a blur as she muddled mint, poured bourbon, and garnished glasses with twists of lime. Her flats pinched her feet after hours on the polished marble floor, but her posture remained impeccable, her voice steady as she greeted each guest with a warmth they rarely returned. To them, she was the girl behind the bar, a fleeting presence who existed only to fulfill their whims. Yet there were moments, small, fleeting ones, that made the nights bearable. A guest who said thank you with genuine kindness, a nod from a colleague who shared a tired smile. These were the sparks that kept her going, reminders that humanity could still pierce through the gloss of wealth, but the undercurrent of judgment was always there, simmering beneath the surface. Her manager, a wiry man named Greg with a smirk that never reached his eyes, seemed to take pleasure in piling on extra tasks, cleaning spills, restocking shelves, staying late to scrub the bar long after the last guest had left. Her colleagues weren't much better. Some ignored her, others whispered behind her back, their words laced with assumptions about her place in this world. "She's just here for the tips," one had muttered once, unaware that Theresa's heart was tied to a purpose far greater than their imagination could stretch. She never corrected them. She didn't need to. Her presence was her answer, her work her proof. As the night wore on, the bar grew busier, the air thick with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Theresa moved like a dancer, weaving between orders, her hands steady even as her mind wandered to the research paper waiting in her dorm, the one she'd been up until 2 a.m. refining. She thought of her father's voice, low and warm, telling her that education was the key to breaking chains. She thought of the kids in his old neighborhood, their eyes wide with possibility at the new library her donations had helped build. These thoughts anchored her, kept her grounded even as a guest snapped their fingers for another drink, their impatience a silent reminder of the invisible line between them. The resort's opulence was a world apart from the one Theresa was fighting for, but she carried that fight with her, in the way she stood, in the way she refused to let the weight of others' biases bend her. She wasn't here to prove anything to the guests or her co-workers. She was here for herself, to test her strength, to learn the lessons her father had taught her through living them. And though the neon lights cast long shadows, Theresa shone, brighter, her resolve a quiet flame that no amount of dismissal could extinguish. The night was young, the bar alive with possibility, and Theresa Loren was ready for whatever it would bring, her heart steady, her spirit unbroken. The Sunset Haven Resort's bar pulsed with life as the night deepened, the jazz saxophone curling through the air like smoke, weaving between the clatter of glasses and the low hum of privileged conversation. Theresa Loren stood behind the counter, her hands a blur of motion, shaking, pouring, garnishing, each move precise, a silent symphony of skill honed through months of relentless shifts. The neon lights bathed her in a soft glow, catching the sheen of sweat on her brow and the quiet strength in her dark eyes. Her black apron was spotless, her posture unyielding, but beneath the surface, a storm brewed. The weight of the day pressed against her, not from the trays she carried or the cocktails she mixed, but from the invisible barriers that met her at every turn, the ones that whispered she didn't belong. Theresa's nights at the bar were a marathon of endurance. She navigated the polished marble floor in flats that pinched her heels, her body aching from hours of standing, yet her smile never wavered. She memorized orders with the sharpness of a scholar, delivering martinis and mojitos with a grace that made the act look effortless. But effortlessness was a lie. Her manager, Greg, a man with a perpetual smirk and eyes that lingered too long, seemed to delight in testing her limits. "Theresa, clean the spill by table 6, he'd bark, even as she balanced a tray of drinks. "Restock the limes, and don't forget the glasses in the back." The tasks piled up, always more than her colleagues were asked to do, as if her presence demanded extra proof of worth. She complied without complaint, her hands moving with the rhythm of someone who'd learned to swallow indignity and keep going. Her co-workers were no kinder. Most ignored her, their conversations halting when she approached, as if her presence disrupted some unspoken code. Others were bolder, their words sharp and careless. "The black girl's got this," one muttered. When a spill needed cleaning, as if her name, Theresa, was too much effort to learn. Another, a wiry blonde named Claire, smirked as she passed, whispering to a colleague, "She's just here for the tips, right? Probably needs it more than us." The words stung, not because they were true. Theresa's inheritance could have bought her freedom from this job, but because they reduced her to a stereotype, a shadow in a uniform. She didn't correct them. She didn't need their validation. Her purpose was bigger than their whispers, rooted in the lessons her father had etched into her heart. Dignity wasn't given, it was claimed. Yet the bar wasn't her only world. By day, Theresa was a force in the lecture halls of her university, a graduate student whose research on educational equity burned with a passion that left her peers in awe. In the quiet of the library, surrounded by stacks of books and the soft glow of her laptop, she poured her soul into papers that argued for opportunity, for systems that lifted those society overlooked. Her father's stories of his childhood in Miami's poorest corners fueled her work, each citation a tribute to his dream of a better world. She'd stay up past midnight, her eyes heavy but her mind alight, drafting proposals for scholarships and community programs. These moments were her sanctuary, a place where her voice mattered, where she wasn't just the girl behind the bar, but a scholar shaping the future. Back at the resort, the contrast was stark. The guests saw her as a function, not a person. Their orders came with snaps of fingers or dismissive waves, their eyes rarely meeting hers. "Another gin and tonic quick," one would say, as if her speed determined her worth. Theresa delivered every drink with precision, her voice warm despite the coldness she received. She'd learned to read the room, to sense the ones who'd tip generously and those who'd leave nothing but a mess. But even the small kindnesses, a rare thank you or a nod of appreciation, felt like oases in a desert of indifference. Her colleague Marcus, one of the few who treated her as an equal, would sometimes catch her eye with a grin. "You're too good for this place, T," he'd whisper, passing her a bottle of soda water. "Just a few more hours." She'd smile back, the banter a lifeline in the solitude of her role. The air shifted as the night grew late, the bar filling with the kind of crowd that thrived on status. Among them entered Alexandra Moris, a 32-year-old socialite whose presence was as commanding as it was unsettling. Her red hair cascaded in sculpted waves, her emerald dress clinging to her frame like a second skin. Diamonds glinted at her throat, catching the neon light with every tilt of her head. She strode in with her 8-year-old son trailing behind, his sneakers scuffing the marble floor. Alexandra didn't walk. She arrived, her heels clicking like a metronome of entitlement. Her reputation preceded her, whispered among the staff as a warning, a woman whose wealth was matched only by her disdain for those she deemed beneath her, particularly anyone with skin darker than her own. Theresa felt the change in the room, the moment Alexandra sat at the bar, her son fidgeting beside her. "Vodka soda, no ice, and make it fast," Alexandra ordered, her voice sharp, her eyes fixed on her phone rather than Theresa. The words weren't just a request, they were a dismissal, a reminder of the hierarchy that governed this space. Theresa nodded, her hands steady as she poured the drink, but a flicker of tension tightened her chest. She'd served guests like Alexandra before, their rudeness as predictable as the tide, but something about this woman's gaze, cold, appraising, laced with a prejudice she didn't bother to hide, set her on edge. Still, Theresa kept her composure, her smile a shield, her movements deliberate. She placed the glass before Alexandra with a soft, "Here you are, ma'am," and stepped back, bracing for whatever came next. The night wore on, the bar a whirlwind of orders and expectations. Theresa moved through it all, her mind split, between the demands of the present and the dreams that kept her grounded. She thought of the children in her father's old neighborhood, their futures tied to the work she did, the sacrifices she made. Each insult she endured, each extra task she completed, was a step toward understanding the world her father had fought to rise above. She wasn't here to be liked or admired. She was here to learn, to grow, to carry her father's legacy forward. And as the neon lights flickered and the jazz played on, Theresa Loren stood behind the bar, a quiet force in a world that tried to diminish her, her resolve as unshakable as the city skyline beyond the glass. The Sunset Haven Resort's pool. Deck glowed under the Miami moon, its turquoise water shimmering like liquid glass, reflecting the neon lights that framed the bar nearby. The night was alive with the hum of wealth, laughter spilling from the lips of guests lounging on cushioned chaises, their glasses clinking in toasts to nothing in particular. Theresa Loren, still in her black apron, had slipped out for a rare moment of respite, her shift at the bar momentarily quiet. She leaned against a palm tree, the warm breeze brushing her skin, her curls loosened slightly from their tight bun. Her flats were damp with spilled soda water, her shoulders heavy from hours of relentless service, but her eyes, sharp and watchful, scanned the deck with the instinct of someone who'd learned to notice everything. It was then, in that fleeting pause, that the world tilted. Near the pool's edge, Alexandra Moris's 8-year-old son Oliver darted back and forth, his sneakers squeaking against the slick tiles. His red hair caught the light, a miniature echo of his mother's fiery locks. Alexandra sat at a nearby table, her emerald dress glinting as she scrolled through her phone, oblivious to her son's reckless dance with danger. The boy laughed, chasing an imaginary game, his steps growing bolder, closer to the water. Theresa's gaze locked onto him, a prickle of unease tightening her chest. She'd seen kids play too close to the pool before, their parents distracted by martinis or status. But before she could call out, Oliver's foot slipped, his small body tipped forward, arms flailing, and with a sharp splash he vanished beneath the water's surface. The world slowed. Theresa's heart lurched, her scholar's mind giving way to raw instinct. She dropped her towel, kicked off her flats, and sprinted toward the pool. Without hesitation, she dove in, the cold water biting her skin as she plunged toward the boy. Her arms cut through the depths, her eyes stinging as she spotted Oliver's small form sinking, his limbs thrashing in panic. She reached him in seconds, her hands closing around his waist, pulling him upward with a strength fueled by adrenaline. They broke the surface together, Oliver gasping and coughing, his eyes wide with fear. Theresa held him close, swimming to the edge, her breath ragged but steady. She lifted him onto the tiles, ensuring he was safe before climbing out herself, her clothes clinging to her like a second skin, water streaming down her face. The crowd had noticed now, heads turned, conversations halted, the jazz from the bar seeming to falter in the sudden hush. Theresa knelt beside Oliver, her voice soft but firm. "You're okay, buddy. Just breathe." The boy nodded, still coughing, his small hands gripping her arm. But before relief could settle, a shadow loomed. Over them, Alexandra Moris stood above, her face a mask of fury, her diamond necklace glinting like a warning. "How dare you touch my son?" she shrieked, her voice slicing through the night like a blade. The accusation landed like a slap, drawing gasps from the onlookers. Theresa froze, her wet clothes heavy, her chest heaving, but her eyes met Alexandra's, with a quiet fire. "I pulled him out of the pool, ma'am," she said, her tone calm, measured despite the tremor in her hands. "He was drowning." Alexandra clutched Oliver, pulling him away as if Theresa were a threat. "You endangered him," she spat, her red hair wild in the breeze, her eyes blazing with a prejudice that needed no explanation. "What kind of incompetent are you, grabbing my child like that?" The words were loud, performative, meant for the growing crowd now circling the scene. Guests whispered, some with furrowed brows, others with phones already raised, their screens glowing in the dark. Theresa stood slowly, water pooling at her feet, her apron sodden and clinging to her hips. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice, but the weight of every eye on her burned hotter than the Miami night. She knew what this looked like: a black woman accused, her heroism twisted into a crime. Greg, the manager, appeared, his smirk replaced by a tense frown. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his gaze flickering between Alexandra and Theresa. Before Theresa could explain, Alexandra cut in, her voice dripping with entitlement. This girl nearly hurt my son. She grabbed him, threw him around in the pool. I want her dealt with now." The lie was brazen, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never been questioned. Theresa's jaw tightened, but she held her ground. "I saved him," she repeated, her voice steady, though the sting of injustice clawed at her chest. Greg's eyes darted to Alexandra, then back to Theresa, his silence a betrayal. "Theresa, apologize to Mrs. Morris," he said finally, his tone clipped, as if her guilt were a foregone conclusion. "We can't have this kind of disruption." The word apologize hit like a stone. Theresa's hands curled into fists, her nails biting into her palms. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said, her voice low but unwavering, each syllable a refusal to bend. The crowd murmured, some nodding in quiet support, others shaking their heads in disapproval. Her colleagues clustered near the bar watched in silence, their faces unreadable. Claire, the blonde co-worker who'd mocked her, earlier crossed her arms, a faint smirk playing on her lips. No one stepped forward. No one spoke up. The solitude of the moment wrapped around Theresa like the cold water still dripping from her clothes. But she stood tall, her dignity a shield against the weight of their stares. Unseen by most, a guest, at the edge of the crowd held up a phone, the camera's red light blinking as it captured every second. The splash, the rescue, Alexandra's tirade, Theresa's quiet defiance. The video, grainy but damning, was already uploading to the digital ether, its pixels carrying the truth to a world beyond the resort's gilded walls. Theresa didn't know it yet, but those fleeting moments by the pool were about to ignite a firestorm. For now she faced Alexandra alone, her breath steady, her resolve unbroken. The jazz resumed, its notes soft but jarring against the tension. Alexandra turned away, still clutching Oliver, her heels clicking as she stormed off, leaving Theresa soaked and solitary under the neon glow. But in her eyes burned a spark of something fiercer than shame, something that promised she would not be diminished. Not tonight, not ever. The neon glow of the Sunset Haven Resort faded into the background as Theresa Loren trudged through the staff entrance, her damp clothes still clinging to her skin, the scent of chlorine lingering like a bitter memory. The night air was thick with Miami's humidity, but it couldn't match the weight pressing against her chest. The pool incident, her selfless dive to save a boy, only to be met with Alexandra Moris's venomous accusations, had left a bruise, deeper than any physical mark. Theresa's hands trembled as she untied her apron, her mind replaying the moment. Alexandra's shrill cry, "How dare you touch my son?" The manager's demand for an apology, the silent stares of her colleagues. She'd held her ground, refused to bow, but the solitude of that moment clung to her like the water that had soaked her through. Back in her dorm, the world beyond the resort was waking up to her story. Unbeknownst to Theresa, a spark had ignited in the digital ether. The guest who'd raised their phone by the pool, capturing the rescue and the confrontation in grainy clarity, had pressed post. The video, just 90 seconds long, spread like wildfire across X, TikTok, and YouTube. It opened with Theresa's dive, her arms slicing through the water to pull Oliver to safety, her voice calm as she reassured him. Then came Alexandra's, voice sharp and entitled, accusing Theresa of harm, followed by the manager's curt demand for an apology. The clip ended with Theresa standing tall, her wet clothes a testament to her courage, her eyes burning with quiet defiance. By midnight, the video had racked up 1 million views. Hashtags like "Justice for Theresa" and "Respect the Staff" trending like a gathering storm. Comments flooded in, some furious. "This woman saved a child and got humiliated for it?" Others, "Reverend, her grace is unreal, she's a hero." The internet churned with outrage. Screenshots of Alexandra's sneer, Her red hair glinting under the neon lights became a symbol of unchecked privilege. Users dug into her digital footprint, unearthing old posts and interviews that revealed a pattern of disdain for those she deemed lesser, particularly people of color. A former assistant, emboldened by the video, posted a thread on X. Worked for Alexandra Moris for 2 years. She called me the help and mocked my accent. This is who she is. The thread exploded, retweeted thousands of times, each reply adding fuel to the fire. A fashion influencer who'd collaborated with Alexandra shared a clip of her dismissing a black stylist as unqualified for no reason other than prejudice. The court of public opinion was in session, and its verdict was merciless. Theresa, however, was unaware of the storm brewing online. She sat cross-legged on her dorm bed, her laptop open to a half-finished research paper on educational equity, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. The room was small, cluttered with books and sticky notes. A photo of her father pinned to the wall, a reminder of why she pushed so hard. Her phone, tucked under a pillow, buzzed faintly, but she ignored it. The ache in her chest wasn't just from Alexandra's words or the manager's betrayal. It was the weight of being seen as less, of having her act of heroism twisted into a crime. She'd chosen this job to understand the world's raw edges, but tonight, those edges had cut deep. She closed her eyes, her father's voice echoing in her mind. You don't need their approval, Theresa. You need your own. But tonight, even that felt distant. Across campus, in the quiet elegance of his office, James Carter, the university president and Theresa's godfather, sat at his desk, his silver-rimmed glasses reflecting the glow of his computer screen. He'd just received a message from a colleague, a link to the viral video. He clicked play, his jaw tightening as he watched Theresa pull the boy from the pool, only to be berated by Alexandra's venomous accusations. James's eyes, usually warm with wisdom, burned with a rare fury. He'd known Theresa since she was a child, had held her hand at her father's funeral, promising to watch over her as his own. Her father, his best friend, had been a man of quiet strength, and Theresa carried that same fire. Seeing her humiliated, her courage dismissed, struck a chord that resonated with every injustice he'd witnessed in his own life. James picked up his phone, his fingers steady as he dialed Theresa's number. When she answered, her voice was soft, tired, but steady. "Uncle James," she said, the nickname a remnant of childhood. "It's late." He didn't waste words. "I saw the video, Theresa. Are you okay?" She hesitated, the weight of the night pressing against her throat. "I'm fine," she lied, then softer. "It's just hard." James's voice was firm but warm, a lifeline in the dark. "You did nothing wrong. You saved that boy, and I'm going to make sure the world knows it." He paused, his tone softening. "Your father would be so proud of you." The words brought a shimmer to Theresa's eyes, but she blinked it away, nodding as if he could see her. Back online, the video's reach grew exponentially. By dawn, it had surpassed 3 million views, shared across platforms with captions that called for justice. "This is what systemic bias looks like," one post read pinned to the top of X. Another, from a local activist, demanded accountability. "Sunset Haven Resort. Do better. Protect your staff." The hashtags multiplied. "Theresa deserves better. End racism now." Each one a brick in the wall of public outrage. A news outlet picked up the story, running a headline: "Heroic bartender shamed by socialite at luxury resort." Clips of the video played on morning shows, commentators shaking their heads at Alexandra's cruelty and the manager's complicity. The world was watching, and it was angry. Theresa, still in her dorm, finally checked her phone as the notifications piled up. Messages from classmates, strangers, even Marcus from the bar flooded her screen. "You're trending, T," Marcus texted, followed by a string of fire emojis. She opened X, her breath catching as she scrolled through the comments. "This woman is a queen," one read. "She saved a kid and got attacked for it. Shame on that resort." The support was overwhelming. A tidal wave of validation, but it didn't erase the sting of the night before. She felt exposed, her quiet act of courage now a spectacle. She set her phone down, her fingers trembling, and turned back to her laptop. The research paper stared back, a reminder of her purpose, but the words blurred as her mind replayed Alexandra's sneer, the crowd's silence. James, meanwhile, was already planning his next move. He drafted an email to the university's communications team, his words sharp and resolute. "This is about more than one incident," he wrote. "It's about dignity, about standing up, for those who stand for others." He thought of Theresa's father, the man who'd taught him that justice wasn't just a word but a fight. As the sun rose over Miami, casting golden light across the campus, the video continued to spread, its ripples reaching far beyond the resort's gilded walls. Theresa didn't know it yet, but the world was rallying behind her, and the man who'd promised to protect her was ready to step into the fray. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the Sunset Haven Resort, casting golden streaks across the marble floors, but the usual air of opulence felt fractured, tainted by the echo of the previous night's injustice. Theresa Loren sat in her dorm, the weight of the viral video still settling around her like dust after a storm. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, notifications piling up from strangers who'd seen her courage, her humiliation, her unyielding grace. Yet the support, while warming, couldn't erase the sting of Alexandra Moris's accusations, or the betrayal of her manager's silence. Across town, in the oak-paneled office of the university president, James Carter stood tall, his silver hair catching the light, his eyes burning with a resolve forged by decades of friendship and a promise kept. The video had sparked a fire, and he was ready to fan the flames. James Carter, Theresa's godfather and her late father's closest confidant, had watched the footage of the pool incident with a clenched jaw, his heart heavy with both pride and fury. Theresa's dive to save the boy, her quiet defiance in the face of Alexandra's venom, was a mirror of her father's strength, a man who'd faced his battles with prejudice and never bowed. James had made a vow at his friend's graveside to protect Theresa, and now, as the video ricocheted across the internet, he knew the moment had come. He stepped to the podium in the university's grand lecture hall, the room packed with students, faculty, and reporters drawn by the growing scandal. The air was thick with anticipation, microphones angled toward him like arrows waiting to fly. "What happened at Sunset Haven Resort," he began, his voice low but resonant, "was not just an attack on one woman. It was an assault on dignity, on courage, on the very humanity we strive to uphold." He paused, letting the words settle, his gaze sweeping the room. Theresa Loren, a brilliant scholar at this institution, saved a child's life. She acted with selflessness, only to be met with baseless accusations and prejudice. His voice rose, steady but sharp, each syllable a gavel. "I am her godfather, and I knew her father, a man who taught us that justice is not a gift, but a right we must claim." The room erupted in murmurs, cameras flashing as James's words hit their mark. Sunset Haven failed to protect her. They allowed a culture of bias to fester, and that ends now. The crowd leaned forward, some nodding, others whispering, the weight of his authority turning the tide. He didn't mention the video's millions of views or the hashtags, "Justice for Theresa," "End Racism Now," that had set social media ablaze. He didn't need to. The world was already listening. Across the city, the resort's management scrambled. The viral video had turned their polished facade into a liability, with news outlets running headlines like "Luxury Resort Shames Heroic," "Bartender." Guests canceled reservations and the phone lines buzzed with complaints. But the real blow came from Ethan Carter, James's son and a major shareholder in the resort. Ethan, a quiet man in his 30s with his father's sharp eyes and a moral compass honed by years of watching injustice, sat in a boardroom overlooking Miami's skyline. He'd seen the video, felt the same fury as his father, and remembered Theresa's laughter from childhood summers spent together. Without hesitation, he drafted a letter to the resort's board. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing my investment. A business that tolerates prejudice has no place in my portfolio. The move sent shockwaves through the resort's finances, stock prices dipping as whispers of a crisis spread. The fallout was swift. Greg, the manager who'd demanded Theresa apologize, was called into a meeting with the resort's CEO. His smirk was gone, replaced by a sheen of sweat as he faced an internal investigation. Evidence of his pattern of bias, assigning Theresa extra tasks, ignoring her colleagues' slights, surfaced in staff testimonies prompted by the video's spotlight. By noon, he was escorted from the premises, his termination letter citing failure to uphold workplace standards. Claire, the co-worker who'd smirked during Theresa's humiliation, and others who'd stood by silently faced reassignments or disciplinary reviews. The resort issued a public apology, promising reforms, but the words rang hollow to those who'd seen the truth in Theresa's soaked apron and unyielding gaze. Alexandra Moris, meanwhile, felt the ground shift beneath her. Her Instagram, once a curated shrine to her socialite status, was flooded with comments calling out her cruelty. "You attacked a hero," one read, shared thousands of times. Brand partnerships dissolved quietly, emails citing reputational concerns. A fashion label she'd represented dropped her with a statement, "We stand against discrimination in all forms." Her name, once a ticket to exclusive galas, became a scarlet letter. She deleted her social media accounts, but the internet had receipts, screenshots, clips, and threads detailing her history of disdain. A former colleague posted, "She fired me for looking unprofessional because of my braids." This is her true face. Alexandra's world of privilege, built on appearances, crumbled under the weight of exposure. Theresa, back in her dorm, felt the world's attention like a spotlight too bright to bear. She'd seen the headlines, the hashtags, the messages of support, but they didn't erase the memory of Alexandra's sneer or the silence of her colleagues. She sat at her desk, her research paper open, but her fingers hovered over the keyboard, unable to type. The video had made her a symbol, but all she wanted was to be herself, a scholar, a daughter, a woman who'd acted on instinct to save a life. Her phone rang, James's name flashing on the screen. "You don't have to go back there," he said, his voice a steady anchor. "You've done enough, Theresa. Let me handle this." She nodded, though he couldn't see her throat tight. "I need to think," she whispered, and he understood. That afternoon, Theresa made her decision. She walked to the resort, her steps deliberate, her head high. The staff entrance felt different now, the air charged with whispers of the scandal. Marcus met her at the door, his eyes wide. "You're back?" he asked, almost disbelieving. She smiled faintly. "Just to finish something." In the manager's office, now occupied by a temporary replacement, she handed in her resignation. "I came here to learn," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I've learned enough." The new manager stammered an apology, but Theresa was already turning away, her apron folded neatly in her hands. She stepped into the sunlight, the weight of the bar lifting from her shoulders, her path clear. She wasn't running from the fight, she was choosing a new one that honored her father's legacy and her dreams. As the day faded, the resort's polished halls buzzed with change. Guests whispered about the video, some approaching the bar with newfound respect, others avoiding it out of shame. Online, the hashtags continued to trend, each share a testament to Theresa's courage. James sat in his office drafting a statement for the university, his words a promise to stand by those who stood for others. Theresa, now free from the resort's constraints, turned her gaze to her research, her heart steady with purpose. The world had seen her, but she saw herself most clearly, a woman unbroken, ready to build the future her father had dreamed of. The Miami sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of coral and gold as Theresa Loren stepped out of the Sunset Haven Resort for the last time. Her black apron, once a symbol of her silent endurance, was folded neatly in her bag, no longer a weight on her shoulders. The air smelled of salt and possibility, the city's pulse syncing with her own. She'd walked away from the bar not as a defeated woman, but as one who'd chosen her path with clarity. The viral video, the hashtags, the public's outrage, they'd brought justice, but it was her resolve that carried her forward. Theresa wasn't running from the fight. She was stepping into a bigger one that honored her father's legacy and her dreams. The resort's neon lights faded behind her, but the fire in her heart burned brighter than ever. Back at her dorm, Theresa sat at her desk, the familiar clutter of books and notes a grounding force. Her laptop glowed with the draft of her research paper, its title bold on the screen, Equity in Education, Building Futures for Marginalized Youth. Each word was a thread woven from her father's stories, from the kids in his old neighborhood who deserved more than the world had given them. She typed with a ferocity she hadn't felt in weeks, the pool incident's sting fading. As her purpose sharpened, the world had seen her as a hero, a victim, a symbol. But here, in the quiet of her room, she was simply Theresa, a scholar with a mission. Her phone buzzed with messages of support, but she set it aside. The validation was kind, but her father's voice echoed louder. "You're enough, Theresa, always have been." Months passed, and Theresa threw herself into her graduate program with a fervor that left her professors in awe. She presented her research at conferences, her voice steady as she spoke of systemic barriers and the power of opportunity. Her work earned her a prestigious fellowship, one that would fund a project to expand educational programs in underserved communities. Her father's dream made real. She visited the neighborhood where he'd grown up, walking the cracked sidewalks he'd once described. Now home to a new community center her donations had helped build. Children ran through its halls, their laughter a melody of hope. Theresa stood in the doorway, a smile breaking through the weight of her grief. "This is for you, Dad," she whispered, her eyes shimmering but her heart full. Her days at the resort were a distant memory, replaced by late nights in the library and early mornings mentoring students. But one connection from that turbulent night lingered. Ethan Carter, James's son, the man who'd pulled his investment from the resort in a quiet act of solidarity. Ethan had known Theresa since they were kids, their families tied by the bond between James and her father. He'd always been the quiet one, watching from the sidelines with a thoughtful gaze. But the video had stirred something in him. He'd reached out to Theresa after her resignation, a simple text, "You're stronger than anyone I know. Coffee sometime." She'd hesitated, still raw from the ordeal, but his sincerity disarmed her. They met at a small cafe near campus, the air warm with the scent of espresso and sea salt. Their conversation started tentatively, rooted in shared memories of summers spent debating books or sneaking ice cream at family gatherings. But over time, they deepened. Ethan listened as Theresa spoke of her father, her research, and her fight for equity. He shared his struggles, the pressure of his family's legacy, and his quiet rebellion against a world that valued wealth over integrity. They found common ground in their belief that actions mattered more than status, that justice was a choice made daily. Their meetings became a ritual, coffee turning into walks along Miami's beaches, their laughter mingling with the crash of waves. Ethan's steady presence was a balm to Theresa's wounds, his respect for her mind and heart, a quiet promise of something more. One evening, as the sky blazed with a Miami sunset, Theresa and Ethan stood on a boardwalk, the ocean stretching endlessly before them. The horizon glowed violet and gold, a canvas of possibility. "You didn't have to walk away from the resort," Ethan said, his voice soft but clear. "But you did, because you knew your worth." Theresa looked at him, her curls catching the breeze, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "I walked away because I couldn't let her win," she said, her voice steady. "Not Alexandra, not the prejudice, just the part of me that might have doubted." Ethan nodded, his hand brushing hers, a spark passing between them. It wasn't just attraction, it was recognition. Two souls who saw the world through the same lens of compassion and conviction. Their relationship bloomed quietly, rooted in mutual respect. Ethan joined Theresa at community events, standing beside her as she spoke to parents and kids about the power of education. She attended his meetings with local nonprofits, watching him use his influence to fund programs that aligned with her vision. They weren't a power couple in the glossy, superficial sense. They were partners, building something meaningful together. One night, at a fundraiser for the community center, Theresa took the stage, her voice ringing clear as she spoke of her father's dream. Ethan watched from the crowd, his eyes bright with pride. When she stepped down, he pulled her close, whispering, "You're changing the world, Theresa." She smiled, her heart full. "We're changing it together." Theresa's journey wasn't about fame or vengeance. When a reporter asked to interview her about the viral video, she declined. "I'm not a moment," she said, her voice firm. "I'm a person." The words spread online, quoted and praised, but she didn't linger on them. She was too busy teaching, researching, and visiting the kids whose futures she was helping shape. The resort, once a crucible of her resilience, faded into irrelevance. Its reforms, spurred by Ethan's withdrawal and public pressure, were a footnote in her story. Alexandra Moris, her name now synonymous with scandal, had vanished from Miami's social scene, her influence eroded by her actions. Theresa didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her victory was in her work, her love, her refusal to be defined by anyone else's prejudice. As the sun set on another Miami evening, Theresa stood on the balcony of the community center, the city's skyline a glittering backdrop. Ethan joined her, his hand finding hers. The air was warm, scented with salt and distant music. "You're exactly where you're meant to be," he said, his voice a quiet anchor. She nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I'm where I choose to be," she replied, her words a vow. She wasn't just her father's daughter, or a scholar, or a hero. She was Theresa Loren, a woman who'd faced the world's sharp edges and emerged unbroken. The sunset painted her in light, her resolve a beacon, her heart a testament to the truth that dignity wasn't born of status, but forged in the quiet, relentless choice to rise. Thank you for joining us through Theresa Loren's powerful journey, a story of courage, dignity, and triumph over prejudice. What moved you most about her resilience? How did her choice to rise above inspire you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let us know where you're watching from, Miami, London, or beyond. Your voice matters, and we'd love to hear how this story touched you. If Theresa's strength stirred something in you, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. We're grateful for every moment you've spent with us, and we can't wait to bring you more stories that ignite the heart and soul. Until next time, keep shining, keep fighting, and remember, respect speaks louder than status. See you soon.